weekly podcast. This is where we take 5 topics of our choosing. We take 5 minutes apiece and we do it every Friday.
That's right. And he's Jerry, first half of All Your Data, and he's a digital forensics expert. And he's actually acting as an expert this week, right?
This very week. That's right. Yeah, I just got out of court today, in trial all week, and I actually don't testify until Thursday, but it's a big one.
That's exciting. That's exciting.
She's Cassie, and she's a technology attorney. And I didn't get your unique intro this week. What do you think it should be?
I have a hard time thinking of unique intro, but I have a dog named Zuzu that's she's watching me record this right now. So that's the other thing about me.
That'll work. So, do you want to chit chat about Zuzu? Is that? I know you have more than one.
Yeah, I have 2 dogs. She's a Saluki and she's definitely a Velcro dog. So she's always by me. Our other dog is a Foxhound mix, Oliver, and he's the Lord of the Manor. He goes from room to room and he has scheduled time with everybody in this house. So, he may pop up from time to time, but Zuzu's always like by my side.
Should we dive into it?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. The first one's pretty exciting. I've been all weekend long. So why don't
you did? Okay. Yeah. So this is our joint take. It's take number 1. It's about the Murdaugh trial. So this is my take on this one, and you could chime in too. It's Paul Murdaugh and his Snapchat video coming back from the dead.
Absolutely.
To solve his own murder. That was just like, it's the digital forensics. It's like an actual forensic file. We should probably make that a normal.
Jerry, we need to have our own show called Forensic File, but it's digital forensics and not DNA forensics. I even wrote about this on Twitter that, you hear all the time trial attorneys saying, if there's no DNA, jurors won't prosecute. They want the DNA because they've heard it. They hear it all the time on all the shows. And now I think that's going to be digital forensics. And you can get away with anything these days there's so much information on your phone. And like you said, the Snapchat was so vital, but then they were also looking at, how fast he was walking in a certain amount of time and how many steps per hour and what were you doing? Were you jogging? Were you on a treadmill? You can't get away with anything. And even not having a phone, I know Dan Regard said this at University of Florida. I completely agree with him. If your phone is just inexplicably off for 2 hours that were really important 2 hours, that's probably going to get latched onto pretty quickly by prosecutors.
Oh my gosh. It's every single headline trial now where digital forensics plays a part. And in this one, just so the listeners know, and it's such a sad story. We don't really get so excited about it because it's tragic, right? And it was brutal, And so one of Alex Murdaugh's alibis was that he was never at the kennel, right? Or he was saying that all along, all the way leading up to the trial. He was never at the kennel. He was never at the kennel until the defense found out that the prosecution went and subpoenaed a Snapchat video from Snapchat, right? And isn't Snapchat's video supposed to disappear, by the way?
I thought they were supposed to be kind of ephemeral, but maybe they're less ephemeral than what we've been led to believe. So
that was one thing I totally latched onto, is that they disappear on your phone, but they've got them on the servers. So they will, when law enforcement comes to calling, they will turn that over. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. But the second is that when he sent them the Snapchat video, it was just minutes before he got murdered by his own father. And his voice, they didn't get a video up of the defendant here, but Alex Murdaugh's voice was in the background. He was calling to his dogs, and you can listen to it. It's really eerie that he sounds so familiar and so calm just minutes before he murdered his son, Paul, and his wife. It's totally tragic. But when when that video was taken, it confirmed his presence at the murder site, even though he denied it. And so that's why he ultimately had to take the stand.
Right. And I think the point you make, we get excited not because a lot of it for me, I've always been very interested in true crime. And for me, it's like, how do they solve the case? Even as a teenager watching, City Confidential or the original Forensic Files, it's how did that case get solved? And I found it interesting that that was a piece of evidence, a recorded voice, and he took the stand,
Yeah.
you know? So the jurors were able to hear his voice
Yeah.
talking. And they, usually, and this happened in court where there were people authenticating saying, is that voice Alex Murdaugh? People were saying that. But then the juror couldn't make that determination themselves because they heard him talking, not a recording of him compared
That's a
to the
good point.
recording. It's him compared to a recording. And I'm just really baffled by it. I mean,
Right.
these guys are great they're great litigators. So it's not like they haven't litigated before. And I was reading articles and them saying it was the Snapchat. That was the thing that did it for
That
them.
was the thing, because there was no hard evidence. Everything
Yeah.
was circumstantial, but that actually placed him at the scene of the crime. I think we're going to go here for a second. Let me take it there.
Yeah.
What if he didn't take the stand and his defense was, that's a deep fake?
I mean, I think that would have been there would have had to have been like experts on trial validating it, right? Then it
Right.
turns into the validity of the evidence. And maybe that would have muddied the water enough or distracted enough for the defense,
That's right.
It's all
It
incredibly
didn't come up in that one, but it will start coming up.
absolutely.
And when it does, you and I will be there to talk about it.
Every time we will be there. So should we move on to our next
Let's move on. Take two. That's yours.
take two? So this one is Avril 15. And you know me, Jerry, I kind of like NFTs. A lot of it is professional curiosity because, for me to really understand how NFTs work, and part of this is just me learning how blockchain works, I wanted to go buy some NFTs, right? So we talked about ordinals last week, and ordinals are kind of the Bitcoin version of
Right.
NFTs. Right now, NFTs are something that were created based off of the Ethereum blockchain because of additional functionality that's part of that blockchain. And this was one of the first NFT projects that I bought. And most of the projects that I bought I've participated in by buying an NFT. They're women founded, really about community. So trying to get more women in Web3 and involved in NFT projects, or is supporting women artists specifically, or whatever. But this one really emotionally hooked me because it's a series of 10 seasons with specific characters that have been created. Avril 15, that's like the main character. And it's fairly limited run. It's similar in that it's generative AI kind of, but each of the profile photo NFTs, they're all hand drawn originally by Illustrator and then digitally remixed a little bit, after it's scanned. And like the real focus on community, I think that they're, going back to kind of the cultish conversation we had in our first episode, I think some of that is just, oh, community is really important to Web3. The proof can kind of be in the pudding, right? People can say that, but how much is it really, harkening back to maybe some of like the aughts tech startups that were like, we're family, but then people can kind of take advantage of that, right? What I like so much about Avril 15 are a couple of things. One, it's run by two guys in their free time. They're hustling, they're working hard, they're illustrators and a friend, and they're not doing this for like a rug pull or anything. They're also like total Gen X vibes. When I saw the artwork, it made me
It's great.
it made me
Totally you. Yeah.
yeah, it made me think so much of my husband and I will be 20 years this year. And it made me think of us being in the late 90s, like still into Radiohead, but like that Radiohead vibe. I remember going to Ghost in the Shell, seeing Ghost in the Shell in the movie theater, and there's so many independent movies and independent graphic novels. You had Max, you had Madman, you had Bone. Oh my gosh, Bone's a great one. You had all of these great IPs out there, new IPs, much less the movies that we're just really not seeing now, and like for me, projects like this are in an age where so many studios, I think, are risk averse because they have huge shareholders to answer to. They're not really taking risks on new IP, like new content. But I see the NFT space as a place where that could really happen and a lot of creativity can come. So
Well, isn't it because NFTs is really made for artists that want to own their artwork improve and really get compensated for it and get royalties. I mean,
Right.
probably with the rise of generative AI, the last solace or last refuge for real artists that draw by hand and, create their own work.
And what I really like about this group is that they built up a pretty strong following on Twitter, and they dedicate every Sunday to highlighting artists with under 2,000 followers
Nice.
on Twitter. So they pick
Nice.
5 followers, and then they've started curating small artists to highlight and be sold in like a specially curated set on Foundation, which is a secondary market that they've moved towards. They were originally primarily on OpenSea, but they moved to Foundation because OpenSea,
Okay.
there were some discussions about royalties, and for them, they took a really hard stance. We're going to move to Foundation because of the discussion or discourse around royalties. But I think for me, it's kind of like a beacon of hope. It's not just like a cash grab or anything. And they've been very vocal, the founders, about we're not in this to make money. We're in this to support artists, and it's for art's sake, which I feel very strongly about. It's to me, art is more than just like how much money can I get out of it. It's the emotion that comes from it, all that stuff, and they have very limit like your NFTs that you buy build on top of each other. Like if you have a series 1 or season 1 and a season 2, then you're guaranteed season 3, but you can't like suck up all of them and get all of the, like, they don't want someone to hold all of them. So
Right.
it's just a very encouraging space, to be
So
around.
where can our listeners go find that project? So they just go to foundation.io or
I would
URL?
I would go to Twitter, and they're very active on Twitter.
Oh, go ahead, pull that up. I love how you advocate for all this stuff. You think deeply about the takes that you're going to do every week on our podcast, and I like the humanitarian side of what you're.
Yeah, I mean,
What you're
what are we in this world without art, without music and things like that? And it's very easy to look around away from that, and kind of ignore that. But,
Yeah,
and
it's a
it's
good
not
reminder.
art to make money from. It's really, what emotion does that art evoke? And that art, whenever I saw it, it evoked very strong nostalgic emotions for me. And it just gives me like a very, warm and fuzzy place. And whenever I bought the NFTs I bought, it was really from this reminds me of my husband and I when we first started dating over 20 years ago. Started dating 25 years before we got married. So the artist is Tim McDonough, and he's based in England. I believe he's in Bristol. And he does illustrations in his full-time job, and this is his extra thing. And then his assistant is Nathan. Nathan, I don't remember his last name. And then there's also a dog in the mix. His name is Pete, and he's very cute. But it's a really great community. And, I know a lot of there are good projects out there. If you find it, don't just chase the hype. Don't go out there and chase the hype. Really, go out there and see what opportunities there are, because there are some good ones. They're not all bad. They're not all bad.
They are all bad. Should we jump to take 3?
Yeah. Let's go 3. Your turn.
Okay. Take 3. My turn. SLAPA. So SLAPA, this is brand new. Okay.
Okay.
So AI is moving so quickly. SLAPA stands for Self-Learning Agent Performing APIs. Self-Learning Agent Performing APIs. Now, we already know that generative AI, like ChatGPT, knows how to code, right? Writes source code for you.
Right.
So a lot of these applications try to leverage each other. Why do we create the wheel if there's another service out there, a web service or another API that you could draw from and incorporate it into your own app? And so you can plug into as many APIs as you want. What this self-learning agent does is when it can't figure out a solution to your request, it'll scan the internet for API documentation for the functionality that it needs and automatically connect into it with code. This is like mind-blowing. So now it's going to get to the point, because that's the one sticking point originally, is like, you got to create your own code interface with these other applications, right? It will figure it out. It knows when it needs a solution that it can't solve on its own. And it knows that the shortcut to that is to go find an API. And so it'll scan the internet for it. It's just like, what? So really, it's going to get to the point where if you need software to solve a very particular solution, you can ask a chatbot to do it, and it will do it not just on its own, but through the help of another application or web service that's available out there on the internet.
And it'll just run out there behind the scenes, so you don't know if it knows how to do it or if it's out there pulling it from
No,
a separate
it's
API.
totally seamless. It's all in the background.
Wow.
But that's a brand new thing that someone invented. It's called SLAPA, so keep an eye out for it.
So I have a question on that. Now,
Yeah,
you and I both know technology can be very powerful, but it's also not a magic wand and it is not perfect. I know Aaron
right.
talked about, our friend Aaron talked about automation bias, which I definitely know it exists. We deal with the raw data and we know how imperfect things like automation and
Totally.
data is.
Totally.
So what, I mean, couldn't this kind of just be creating chaos out there because it's running seamlessly. We assume that it's doing the right thing and we assume it's finding API that appropriately aligns with our ask. And then what if it just kind of like spools and gets like more further and further from our truth, but we assume that it's
Yeah.
running as it should because it's like
Well,
intelligent.
that's why I think there's always going to be a man in the loop. There's going to be some level of curation, right? You can imagine like a top 10 list of APIs for whatever function. And then the self-learning agent will refer to that potentially, right? There's got to be some kind of checks and balances in there. Or you're right, because not all the APIs are high quality APIs. In fact, you could think about the dark side of that is you could throw an API out there that does nothing but plant actual malware.
That's what I was about to ask about, like ransomware. How does it not hook on to weaponized APIs out there? So
It remains to be seen. Yeah. There's always that dark side. And it's the side that you and I tend to explore for litigation and computer forensics because it's not all rosy out there.
no, it's definitely not perfect. And I feel like there's a little bit of like extremes where there's a lot of fear mongering when it comes to technology. And then there's a lot of hyper,
Cultishness.
cultish. It's so perfect.
Yeah.
It's idealized, and even like
Mhm.
Bitcoin technology, without getting too fancy, is very idealized of like, or blockchain, it's decentralized and stateless or whatever. You can think these things, but or DAO is stateless or whatever. You can think that, but that doesn't mean a regulator won't roll in and try to like bring a suit against people who have tokens that voted on things. So
Right.
like, I think there's like this, rose colored glasses approach to things. And, then reality kind of stomps through like Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think that's the reality is that, you're trying to skirt all of these regulatory agencies. I mean, that's the concept is that it's like anarchy, but anarchy for good. You can twist it and anyone can take it down a dark road. Anarchy for bad. I like look at all the people who got cheated out of their money, all based on blockchain and their belief in cryptocurrency projects.
right. And so many, NFT projects on the bad side of there have been a ton of rug pulls where people just pump it up. Founders get the money in the first sell and in the mint, and then they peace out. The Mind Budget Connection is a group of people within our profession. I know a couple off the top of my head: Amy Sellers, Chad Riley, got together and said, "You know what? Our profession, e-discovery, whether you're an attorney, a legal tech person, a forensics person, it's very demanding." And I know people may not believe that we work really demanding jobs because we're pretty active on social media. We're doing this. We're just, we just are, we have a high output for the amount of hours, each one of our hours, probably someone else is like 2 or 3, right?
It keeps us from going crazy. It's an outlet, really.
Right. It's an outlet. And I think that there's so much complexity to the work we do, especially as time has gone on and data has gotten more complicated. I think, 10, 15 years ago, e-discovery was not seen as that sophisticated. It was just kind of like you scanned paper and you're organizing electronic versions of paper, but it is so much different from that now.
It is.
And the level of nuanced knowledge that you need to have, you can't just like pass the baton off woefully, without forethought and sufficient training. Like there's so much that comes in. I know when I worked at a service provider, I would hire people without any e-discovery tech experience because I felt it's really important to do that. And that's a long learning cycle. That's easily 6 to 9 months learning cycle, easily for basic stuff, not even super complicated stuff. And the dialogue that they're presenting to the group is we are a profession and we work really hard. So what can we do to minimize burnout? So they've done, they've taken the effort to have a survey for people to fill out. I think a lot of these conversations have come up with COVID. And I also think a generational shift with Gen Z coming in
Sure.
and having a different attitude. And we're both Gen Xers. We talk about it, probably every episode. And I know I'm a workaholic and we're both workaholics, but it's also not a healthy thing. I mean, like I acknowledge that I have a hard time pulling out of like the hyper focus that sometimes come with the type of work that we do. And I know for me personally, last year I had to sit for the Texas bar. And so I was working, 10, 12-hour days. And then I would roll right into studying for the Texas bar. And I would study another, 4 or 5. And I did that every day. And I think I just got into that gear and I could never let myself like get out of it. And it's a hard thing. And I find myself even feeling guilty when I start pulling back. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Jerry. What you
I tweeted something like this the other day. And I was like, isn't it unhealthy when you realize that while on vacation or relaxing, that you're actually not enjoying it, and that your enjoyment is from getting things accomplished at work. And I think part of it is because the workaholic part of it, and I think we're also invested in the meaning of the work that we do. I think what we do is really consequential, and so I think we get we feed off that. That's what gives us enjoyment. I love like knocking out tasks and getting them out the way. It's a huge sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. And it's just like, you're going to make me sit next to a pool all day long and I have to read a book. Like I don't have tension for that anymore. As much as I love reading, because I was a poli-sci English major in university, I just cannot get my head and attention focused long enough to read just an entire chapter nonstop. I always have to turn on my phone. Like, how do you do it? Because I know you love reading. You turn off your phone or put it like in the other
I try. I actually over the holidays, I tried to read, and I've just switched to physical books again. I've been I've read forever. Like I was besties with the librarians growing up at the public libraries, so I kind of grudgingly switched to Kindle. But I did because it's so convenient, especially if you're traveling and stuff, and you read a lot of books in like one trip. I could read 3 books, right? So.
Wow.
But now that I'm home, I felt like I like that digital break of a physical book. And I'm finding now that works, we're out of the holiday groove. I'm finding a hard time getting back to reading. And I was really enjoying getting back into that. So I feel like I'm always like, well, let me just be working on my laptop and maybe at night I'll watch a little bit of TV, but I'll still work. And I struggle finding the balance, and I realize it's something I enjoy doing, but it's also, it's not great for my husband for me to be
going that
things like that. So um it's a challenge. And it's honestly, something that I admire the dialogue from Gen Z and seeing them talk about it. To me, it's a very refreshing. It's not it's something I appreciate, because it definitely makes me stop and pause and go, you know what, there is more. There is more. Life is short. Life is short. Make sure. And I try to take time to, travel with Damon, go on trips with my girlfriends, like go and have dinner with my girlfriends regularly. I try with here.
Go to the symphony.
Go to the symphony. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I try to do that. I wish I was a little bit better about doing it on a more, sustained basis. But anyway, I think it's important dialogue for our profession because burnout is a real thing. So,
Totally.
but well, enough of that. I mean, it's a very important topic, but we do have to move on. So, Jerry, take 5 is all yours.
Take 5 is more AI, and it's actually more mind blowing. So there was an experiment recently. Actually, it's a long term experiment, and it didn't really get traction until AI got involved. Or AI was introduced into the mix. So these scientists are doing MRI scans of people's brains,
Okay.
and they're mapping the brain activity to an image that's being shown to the subject. So they take one subject and they show her a series of pictures, and in response to each of those pictures, they look at the brain activity,
Okay.
right? And so they're mapping the pattern of the brain activity to the picture they're seeing. And how do you do that at scale? You introduce AI. And AI is the perfect pattern detection tool, right? You could throw a ton of data on it. And then rather than try to give it the rules, like you might try to, the human might try to get in there and try to figure out the patterns. No, don't do that. Take all of the brain scan patterns for a particular picture and dump all that data to AI and let AI detect the similarities in patterns. So when it switches from a teddy bear to a lighthouse to an airplane, it knows out of all of the subject data that you've collected what is associated with each picture, such that when AI is detecting a new batch, right? This is like the dense batch, right? You have like the control batch, or when you do statistical modeling, you break things into two data chunks. The first data, it's just like in discovery, right? You train, it's the training data, and then you test it. And so what they found was that as it's monitoring brain scan activity, it doesn't know what picture is coming up, but it'll show the picture to the subject, like a teddy bear picture, and AI will generate the picture of the teddy bear to show that it understands the brain pattern. It shows a picture to a subject of the subject of a lighthouse. It generates a lighthouse picture, confirming that, and it doesn't know what picture you're showing the subject. Just based on its training data, and it's not perfect though, by the way. It's not the exact same teddy bear, but it knows it's a teddy bear. So if you watch the results of this, it is just like, we're gonna die. AI is absolutely gonna kill us.
Like Cylons, it's time to rewatch
Terminator. I mean,
God.
it's just like, isn't that crazy? But it makes sense though if you think about it, right?
I mean, you know what though, Jerry? Like, why don't they know how to fix migraines? This is what I want to know. The break is still a mystery. So maybe looking at silver lining, like maybe somehow that kind of a technology that doctors don't really know really what causes migraine. It is like a big question mark. So many people suffer from it. It's all in your,
and there's just infinite use cases that it just hasn't gotten around to that yet. But I like, for example, cancerous moles, right? So they put all this data, and AI was able to predict based on the shape of the mole, any specific mole. Actually, it highlights it. It puts squares around the mole that they predicts is cancerous. There was a problem with it though, because it was going it went totally off the rails, because the data set that we fed to it, the temps data, was all from a single hospital, where the logo of the hospital on the top right of the X-ray, or not the X-ray, of the photograph, it started incorporating that into its pattern detection, so that when it didn't use photos from that hospital, they were getting a lot of incorrect or false positive results or false negative results. So, you have to be careful about your training data, because it doesn't know how to distinguish those things, or, then that's where the human in the loop you really need. Because once you realize that was bad training data, you can kind of instruct it to ignore the top right where the logo is usually at for these photos of moles on people's bodies.
I mean, it's really amazing what can be done, but it always has to be tempered with the realization that it's not perfect. And even it's not really thinking. Again, referencing back to our friend Aaron, he posted a really interesting article today on LinkedIn where this one linguist, I can't remember, I think her last name is Bender. She talks about people can't, we're trying to humanize the AI, but we have to remember the AI at the end of the day is not a human. Everything it's doing is based off of the algorithm, the training set, and what it's testing, right? At the end of the day, it's like the Sydney thing that we talked about in the first episode.
But there's so much money being poured into it. It's just like the crypto hype, where you're not giving it time to really, get to and check for dangerous things around the corner. I mean, there might be too much of a rush to push this stuff out without fully understanding all the consequences. I think, there needs to be some responsibility. If there's anything that we learned from crypto, it's we need regulatory oversight, right? And sometimes this technology pushes out too quick that the laws and the regulation doesn't catch up to protect consumers at the end of the day. And you can imagine consumers can be severely hurt because what if it says you have a cancerous mole, right? And you go to get treated for that. That's a lot. That's a huge mistake to make.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to get diagnosed for something, some serious health issue that you don't actually have.
Yeah, we're not overhyping it and we're not, saying it's out going to take all of our jobs. So it's just important, to stay on top of what's happening. And it just might be flash in the pan, but some of this is going to stick. There's just too much building going on around the AI space. So
Oh yeah. Yep. So we'll just bring the news as it comes up. I tend to get excited about it. So you're always the good get into my gang. You kind of temper the news.
well,
I keep a level head about it.
yeah, I mean, that I get excited about stuff too. So we tend to balance each other out, which is, it's
We get excited about different things.
yeah, yeah. No, it's good. I do think so going back to the AI mind reader,
hmm
I mean, have they tested it across like different people from different cultural backgrounds or regions or ages? I would imagine like
That absolutely needs to
there-
happen to eliminate bias or to
you know,
minimize bias. Yeah, we tend to. I mean, I tend to talk about that a lot, and we'll see how long that lasts. And we'll see if there's another fad that comes along. We'll talk about it and weigh the pros and cons.
absolutely, as always. So that's a wrap, folks. We hit all 5 of our topics, maybe a little bit over 30, but we'll make it work for our podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you join B&B Take 5 in our next episode.
All right. Oh, what's the show you do about all your data? That's really
Okay. Until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep thinking about all your data.
bye, folks.
Bye.